Okay, it's a minute past 7 and we are ready to get going. Can we have a roll call?
Sure. Maria Ryan.
Here.
On the phone. Stacy Gloss. Morgan Johnston.
Here.
Elizabeth Maszewski.
Here.
Todd Rusk.
Here.
Andrew Stump.
Here.
Stephen Wald.
He's coming right in here behind.
Stephen Wald. He's here.
Okay, well, we have a quorum. Everyone has an agenda in front of them, or at least has had a chance to see it. Do we have any changes to the agenda to propose? Okay. And approval of minutes from the previous meeting. I think we don't have those meetings right now.
Correct. No minutes this meeting. We'll get them
Right.
next meeting.
Okay. We've got some people in the audience. Does anybody want to address this at this point? Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, Scott, you've got a report.
Good evening. First on staff reports, some updates on the Climate Action Plan. We wrapped up our third round of the Urbana-Champaign Energy Star Challenge. The original goal from 2014, as well as numbers from 2014, 2015, and this third round 2016 are in your packet. Very successful program. We were real close to all of our goals. We were always hoping to get more buildings Energy Star qualified. That'd be a 75 or above out of 100 on the Energy Star score. We did have a few. It's not so much that the buildings lost their, declined in their performance from 2014 to 2016, but that buildings came into the challenge, buildings left the challenge. So we do have buildings out there in the community that are eligible to receive the Energy Star. I think all the buildings that participated in our challenge that were eligible did not go through the process to actually get certified. You need to have a professional engineer or a registered architect sign off on your Energy Star data in order to actually get the plaque from US EPA. But it's good to know that we have some high-performing buildings out there. And then we handed out some awards for this year, and those are listed in the packet as well. Update on the Mayor's Monarch Pledge. Staff is supporting some students at the middle school, actually I think it's high school, who are seeking to establish a butterfly garden on campus. We're working on connecting the students with some technical assistance at Extension, and I've heard whispers of some access to seed, so it's a good time to be planning that out. Spring is a little early this year, but I think we still have time to get it together, so we'll continue working on that. Getting more acreage into plants that support monarchs and other pollinators. Well, monarchs specifically is part of the Mayor's Monarch Pledge, and pollinators generally is supporting pollinators generally is something that's in our Climate Action Plan as an adaptation strategy. So,
I was wondering if we could have maybe as a future agenda item here, the master naturalists and master gardeners explain what they do as far as volunteering and how that might be able to work with the city to support these kinds of gardens. Because I know that a lot of times a grade school, or I'm sorry, a K through 12 school works to develop a butterfly garden or a pollinator pocket, but then those students move on, and so it doesn't have that long-term strength. And so I'm just curious what possibilities there could be there.
yeah, there is at the high school there's a science club or a sustainability club, something like that. And that's a vehicle. It has a faculty sponsor. That's a vehicle to keep recruiting students as older students age out and graduate, to keep recruiting young students, so that there's always interest in folks working on the garden. Although someone's managing the landscape as a job now, presumably, well, maybe I shouldn't presume, but yeah, that could be something that could be integrated into the existing landscape plan potentially. On public engagement, staff received a visit from a University of Illinois class from the Natural Resources and Environmental Sciences program to discuss sustainability work and careers. Really nice to have maybe a dozen students at Public Works to talk about all the things the city's working on and what the future of this kind of work looks like for them. On the water management plan, we are once again running a rain barrel and compost bin bulk sale. We're aiming to have that sale on the March 10th, which would be, the RFP closes March 10th. The projected date for the sale is May 6th. That would be the first market day. So we're looking to, share customers with the first market. Use Cycle recently conducted a bin audit, so that takes some explaining. We have a database that we've been keeping for a number of years, and that database records every address that we deliver a cart to. A U-Cycle cart is the 60-gallon, I think it's 60-gallon flip-top cart, two-wheeled cart that you'll see at single-family residences. Well, actually, houses that are 1 to 4 units are in the curbside U-Cycle program. What never happened in the past was a recording of households that had the bin. We used to give out a bin. I don't know, maybe that's like 25 gallons or something. Part of the reason for that, I think, is probably when the bin was included in the U-Cycle program many years ago, they probably just gave one to every household. And why keep track? If you just gave one to every household, you know where you sent them. But as we transitioned into the carts, and as people's bins broke, were stolen, they moved away with them, they used them for other things, that even if we had recorded every household as having a bin, there would be a lot of false positives, right? And we had the same issue with the U-Cycle carts. So we wanted to get a more precise count of who was participating in curbside recycling. And that participation rate we judge by who's received a cart. That can have some false positives, like people might have a cart but leave it in the garage because they decided they're not using it for some reason. But that's about as good as we can get. By doing an actual field audit, essentially following the recycle truck, although not literally, just driving the route on recycle days, we've augmented our participation rate and our total number of households that are putting a cart out. So we're working on updating those numbers in our databases and looking forward to a new contract term for both of our U-Cycle programs, curbside and multifamily. So those contracts were originally 5 years with it was either a 1 or 2 year extension possibility. We've exercised those extensions, and come March, the extension will expire. So we'll be reconsidering the contract, basically just going through it and seeing if there's anything we want to change, and rebidding that later this year. Our next SAC meeting would be April 4th at 7 p.m. in council chambers.
Any other questions for Scott?
I have a quick question, and this is about the U-Cycle carts. Am I mistaken in thinking that all households that have one get charged for the recycling bins? So, I mean, maybe I'm just a little confused because I thought that homeowners are getting charged, so I assume that they use it, but maybe that is naive.
So the fee, the U-Cycle fee, is a mandatory, I think the legal term is use benefit fee, something to that nature. And so it accrues to every single habitation. Every apartment pays the fee that's in the fee schedule for multifamily. Every dormitory unit pays the fee that's in the fee schedule for dormitories. And when I say apartment and dormitory, it's the property owner times how many units they have. And every single family to up to 4 attached family unit households pay the fee schedule that's in the curbside or single family fee. So every household pays the fee, and they are welcome to a U-Cycle cart at no additional cost. Their service will pick up from their curbside if it's curbside, or dumpster if it's multifamily, for no additional cost. But not every household is participating. So to say it another way, the addresses for mailing the bill is different than the addresses for participating households, aka households that we've delivered a cart to.
I was just going to say, just the way you said that was very specific and clear, and I want to say it in more of a layman's way. Everyone's paying for it. If you're not using it, you're wasting money because you're paying for the garbage to go to the landfill. You're already paying for recycling in Urbana.
Thanks for the clarification.
And tell your friends.
Anything else?
I do have something. So when you look at the contract again, that's when you could potentially expand what's collected, right?
Sure.
So I understand there's a couple of styrofoam collection possibilities in town, and so I think it'd be good to look into that opportunity now.
Yeah, it's something we've talked about before, but now things are changed since there are two facilities in town that are accepting that. So something to consider. I presume that anytime you add, we collect all the valuable things like aluminum, and then we collect the less valuable things like mixed paper and plastic bags. And the only things left are the even less valuable things. So we'd have to consider, you would be adding some amount of labor because you're sorting and bundling and finding a market or an off-taker. And you're not going to get much back from that because it's a lower value product. So we'd have to consider that, whether we're in a position to take on more costs.
Do we have any information on those outlets? Who might be taking that material?
So Solo Cup, which is now DART Corporation, started collecting styrofoam at a self-service station at their facility on East Main Street, I think is the address. And so they have a station, and they have a big roll of plastic bag, I think, and you place your styrofoam in there and then put it in the bin, something like that. There's directions. We posted an image of the station and the directions on our Facebook page. So they've got that collection, and then Morgan, you have some.
Yeah, so that's the one that's a public drop-off. The other one is still currently limited to on-campus lab facilities. They collect in campus buildings and then have a partnership with Community Resources, Inc. But CRI, the Community Resources, Inc. is not yet ready to, they don't have a public drop-off location. But I know the technology is here, and I had seen the thing about DART collecting, so I wanted to sort of bring it up.
What type of styrofoam does DART collect?
My recollection is they do not take packaging peanuts. So certainly they would take the blocky styrofoam. Whether they're taking polystyrene that is not expanded, I don't recall. I'd have to take a look at their website, or like I said, it's posted on our Facebook page as well, and probably Courtney Kwong, the recycling coordinator, has it posted on the city's website by now as well.
Do you know if they take food containers?
Probably they would. There may be some standard of cleanliness. So.
Yeah, their marketing material says food containers, but I know you've got to make them clean. It's like pizza boxes can be recycled if they're not covered in cheese and oil.
I had a question about the Energy Star participation. So, you know, one thing that's notable, and we've talked about this in the past. Yeah, if you could bring that slide back. So, you know, we see a decline in participation year to year, and you know, you've offered reflections on this in the past, and I guess just, you know, again, any more reflections on this? Any thoughts from people who are participating on, or who are not participating but explaining why? You know, any kinds of thoughts, and, you know, is there a need for a reformulation, or, you know, just all that kind of stuff?
Sure. Generally, you know, the participants that win awards are very supportive of the program and want to continue. You know, I haven't gotten feedback from folks who have stopped participating or who we appealed to, but never registered or participated. So I don't have a good sense of what they would say their reasons are. I have observed that most of the other cities that have done this sort of program have done it for a year or 2 or 3, and then seems to be no more. So it may be kind of a one-trick pony. You know, our original purpose was to promote Energy Star Portfolio Manager as a management practice, as an energy management practice. And so we certainly have promoted that among several dozen facilities and property owners in the city. And you know, it's hard to know whether there's more to squeeze out of that lemon.
I mean, we've talked about how you know, for some it's a hurdle just to get the information to portfolio manager, and you know, over the last several years there have been more data or just, you know, software solutions that automate that process. And I know that in some utility areas it's a little bit easier with things like Green Button Connect and that kind of stuff. But I just kind of wondering out loud if there's, but none of those things are free.
So Energy Star Portfolio Manager has supported what they call web services for many, many years. And what that means is they will open a portal, so to speak, for a utility company to directly port a customer's utility data into the customer's Energy Star Portfolio Manager account. There is at least one state that requires all the utilities to support web services for their customers. ComEd, apparently, I've been told, supports web services for their customers. It's one of the things that I ask every Ameren employee every time I see them. I pester them about that. At this time, I don't think they have any plans to support web services. Certainly, that would make it a great deal easier. I mean, all the time it takes to generate, to get to the end point and generate a statement of energy performance for, you know, 12 months of data. I don't know, maybe 90% of the time is just keying in energy use data, therms and kilowatt hours from a utility bill. So web services presumably would reduce that time, you know, the inputs by 90%. It would be great to have, but I don't anticipate that happening in Ameren service territory.
And we don't actually know that would lead to an uptick in participation.
It's true.
But it's certainly a hurdle that,
Yeah.
But the reason to get people to do Energy Star Portfolio Manager is because this thing about if you track it, then you're aware of it and you're more likely to leave one of the lights off and go back down the steps to turn off the light that you accidentally left on, right? And so with the way the Ameren bill comes now, it shows you your history by month for electricity and gas, or mine does at least. And so, do we really? What would we gain as a community by having it in the portfolio manager now that it is on the power bill directly?
So what you're referring to is a behavior change tactic that lots of utilities use, where they show you the trends in your own energy consumption. They'll compare you to your neighbors, and that sort of thing as a inducement to engage in energy efficiency behaviors. I think that's that's separate, and that's a good thing, and it's separate from Energy Star Portfolio Manager. What that can't do is give you a comparison to a national data set. It can't get you an Energy Star certification. There are real estate markets where the multi-listing service will allow a property owner to to note that they have an Energy Star certified building, to attach their certificate. We've talked to the local realtors organization here. They were very interested in doing that for theirs, and now they used to have their own standalone MLS system. They're now joining another one or joining a consortium or something to that effect. And so we have to kind of wait and see how that's going to shake out for them. So that, that's a way of adding value to your property. If you have, it's one thing to say my home or business is energy efficient. It's another thing to have a certificate that proves it. So that's another way of adding value, and just the utility bills alone won't do that. Some purchasers might ask for and calculate 12 months of utility bills to judge a commercial or residential building's energy efficiency, but it's a whole lot quicker if you just look at a certificate that says so. So those are some value adds that Energy Star Portfolio Manager has.
I'm thinking that, from that perspective, it's something that would sort of raise awareness about the value of living in Urbana because of all of our additional solar work and our sustainability efforts and attitudes, even if it's, it's our behavior in general, our community culture of sustainability that some people giggle about how, they're those tree huggers, but this would be something that the more people or the more buildings that get certified bring it up in the real estate. So someone who comes straight to town and is now looking for a place to live, and they have a week or a day to pick a place, and they pull up the real estate listings, then they see, Urbana is the place I want to be. Right? And so it makes me wonder how much, maybe the way the program was set up. I mean, I participated for the U of I, and it took staff time, significant staff time, to manage the program in this way. I wonder if there's maybe some other option, we promote the support of it and encourage, just encourage people to participate, but don't necessarily do it as a Urbana Champaign Energy Star challenge, and just as a key effort from the city.
Sure. And to your first point, having lots of buildings that are certified and what the value of that is. I agree with the point you made, and in fact, EnergyStar.gov maintains kind of a pinpoint map that will show the locations of every building that's Energy Star certified. Now, Energy Star, so that map is commercial only. It's a same name but very different program for houses. And I don't think they give a pinpoint for the houses. It's considered a little bit more of a private data point. But for commercial, that's public. And yeah, I think that has some cachet when someone looks at that particular map and sees a lot of pinpoints in a particular city. They know that's a place that's taking energy management very seriously. To your second point, what can be done with Energy Star moving forward? Something that I've considered is whether rather than this formal start and finish of a program, if there is more of a user group model where folks who are using Portfolio Manager or have in the past will get together at appropriate times to check each other's data and encourage each other to fill out and finish their statement of energy performance, and maybe treat it as more of a user group where we're inviting folks to adopt this as a practice. It's one way of moving forward.
I wonder if there's any other community groups that would collaborate in that kind of a thing. I mean, it seems like, anyway, I'm not in a position to nominate anybody for that, but that seems like a community organization collaboration opportunity, and maybe it's, I mean, I don't know what that would mean for your effort, less or neutral.
Insofar as another consideration has been, supporting and helping folks set up and learn to use Energy Star Portfolio Manager as a service. We can certainly do that. We can put that on our website as a service that we offer. Judging by the number of folks who stumbled on or saw a Facebook post on the Energy Star Challenge and then joined, rather than folks who were directly engaged, phone or email or in person, I'm not optimistic that a lot of people are going to go looking for that service on our website, find it, and call and say, "Can you teach me how to use Portfolio Manager?" That said, the cost benefit of me spending some time looking at a computer with someone and teaching them to use it is very, very good. I'm happy to help anyone who wants to set up and manage a Portfolio Manager account for their building. That's not a lot of time, and the possibility that they're going to continue that behavior and make improvements on their building is definitely worth it. So, I don't know, maybe there's a service there and a user group. Maybe there's another community group that wants to promote that. I'm open to all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say the new LEED certification program for the U.S. Green Building Council has a measurement and verification process for the first 5 years that requires putting your data into the Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And so that's just beginning now. So stuff that's in planning now that gets LEED certified, once it's occupied or the certification date is established, then for the following 5 years you have to put the energy and water into the Portfolio Manager. And so I think having that service available and maintaining that resource would be potentially a very needed program for our community. I mean, I'm sure you can figure it out yourself online if you want to, but if there was, if your first search for how do I do this popped up with City of Urbana will help you, I think that's cool.
Yeah. Are there any questions from the audience or any comments on any points in this discussion? Okay. We'll move on to, well, there's no continuing business, so we can move on to new business.
Okay, first is annual report. That is in your packet, yes? Yes, good. So what I've done is put together a PowerPoint that has essentially all that data plus more. So the purpose of the annual report, and yours is a draft. It hasn't gone to council yet is in their packet. One of the reasons it was a draft is at the time I had to post this and email you all for posting purposes for the meeting. I hadn't yet received our final 2016 quarter 4 municipal electric aggregation report. So I didn't have all the data yet. I do now. It came about a half an hour after I emailed you all Friday with the packet. And so I think we have all the data, and I'll show you that in the PowerPoint. If you find any typos or anything that needs an explanation, anything of that nature, let's discuss it tonight. That would be preferable than discussing it at City Council. And my intention is to put it in the next committee of the whole packet. In the past, during staff reports at City Council or Committee of the Whole, I've just mentioned that the report is in their packet and maybe highlighted one particular item of interest. But tonight, and also just to extend that, the purpose of the report is to give a low attention span snapshot of all the work that our division does, to show proportion and trend, which is why most things are in a stacked area graph. For this commission and folks who are watching, they're going to be a little more interested in diving a little bit deeper on some of the data. And so that's the PowerPoint that I have here. So I think I'll propose just to go through the PowerPoint, and any questions you have about the PowerPoint information or the report we'll take after I'm finished. Does that sound good? Okay. So this is calendar year data. Just a little drill down on budgeting. Public Works budget. This is a screen capture. Next couple slides are screen capture from the city's website. We use a third-party tool called Socrata, and this particular tool is called Open Expenditures. If you're on the website, you can almost everything you're looking at is clickable, so you can kind of drill down. Some of it, doesn't make sense because the way the architecture of the tool works versus the architecture of the city's budget sometimes doesn't line up. But it's still a really nice snapshot way to look at a lot of budget data. So you can see, let's see, where everything we do is in the Public Works budget. Drilling down a little bit, these are some sections of the Public Works budget. You can see environmental management at the bottom there. That does not include the U-Cycle budget. U-Cycle is an enterprise fund. It kind of stands out separately. So that portion of the environmental management budget is, energy, water, nuisance abatement, municipal electric aggregation. But that's all within that section there. Drilling in a little bit more, this is the recycling. Many, many years ago, the curbside 1 unit to 4 attached unit curbside recycling was declared home recycling, and so that's why that's there. That's what it is. And then multifamily is pretty explicit what that is. So you can kind of see. Yeah, Steve. The blue line right below 673, I'm not sure. Is that the same or different? So what I suspect is that the dark blue that's filling in that thermometer is probably money that's spent out of the total. Although it would seem that we'd be more like halfway through. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but I think that's what it is. So this is where we stand on Climate Action Plan progress. This is in your report, your monthly report, and also in the annual report. Continuous are things that are essentially done, but we still continue to do them, and so we have that as a kind of a separate category from we did it and we're not doing it anymore. This is... Sorry, it looks really stretched on my screen, but it looks okay on your screen. This is the community's greenhouse gas emissions. You'll notice that the most recent year it shows is 2015. Our Climate Action Plan calls for updating both the community's greenhouse gas emissions and the municipal or city-only greenhouse gas emissions, city facilities and operations and vehicles, every other year. And we do them in opposite years. So we're doing one greenhouse gas inventory every year. Just 1 year it's the entire community. The next year it's just municipal and city facilities. So we'll be doing that inventory for the entire community again next year. This is again 2015 community greenhouse gas emissions, just a different view. Obviously, you can see commercial energy is really important. This is what's updated. It's not in the annual report that was in your packet, but it will be in the annual report that goes to City Council. The quarterly municipal electric aggregation savings. Keep in mind that there is a zero line and negatives on that chart. So there were quarters where this goes back to some really esoteric details about how Ameren, the regulated utility company, does their billing. There's an item called purchased electricity adjustment that is separate from other pricing, and typically the adjustment is a small addition to the fee, and it's usually very less than a penny per kilowatt hour, and it's usually doesn't make a big difference in the price, except there were some strange things going on in the market and in the regulations, and for a time they were actually the purchase electricity aggregate adjustment was very large, and so all that to say, there was some periods, some quarters, where our competitively bid fixed rate was not beating Ameren's announced rate for electricity. On the whole, unless you look just at one quarter, on the whole of the program, it's a savings for our residents to be in aggregation. If you look at the totality of the individual contracts, they've been a savings for our resident. So we've just had a few quarters where we weren't competing well.
Scott,
Yes.
this is not cumulative. This is
Correct. This is
by
not cumulative.
quarter.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I have cumulative. Let's see what the next slide is. Oh, they have cumulative community municipal electric aggregation savings. So we were never zero cumulative. We started out with a good savings, lost a little bit, and now again saving more.
And can you just remind me when does our current municipal aggregation agreement expire?
I think it's 2019, probably
for-
June, I think was the month that we were going on, June meter read, and this last term we went for 3 years instead of 2, but I think it's 2019.
So if I were to summarize that particular slide, is this saying that, okay, so overall, by the time we get to 2016, that customers participating in municipal electric aggregation have saved $1.6 million off of energy bills compared to if they were choosing a different electric supplier, or just compared to if they were choosing the Ameren electric supplier?
Compared to Ameren.
Compared to Ameren.
being on Ameren supply.
And then also, just for clarification, the municipal aggregation is where this is for, is it 100% renewable
Correct.
power?
Through the purchase of renewable energy credits, correct.
Okay.
This is community gas consumption, therms. This is pretty easy to tally up. I get a report, an annual report from Ameren, and so I do have this for 2016. You can see slight decline. Of course, you're looking at both the total and proportional based on the different industries. There was a time before, it looks like 2014, where the reports we received from Ameren did not distinguish between industrial and commercial. Now they do, so that's why the green industrial appears in 2014.
I am sorry. I am just curious on that, if Ameren has ever said anything about what they believe is wasted in terms of natural gas leaks after the meter. So this is consumption, right, that's based on what people are paying for,
Right.
and assuming that it's being burned, but there is natural gas that is kind of after the meter that isn't burned through pipe leaks in people's houses and whatnot. So I know that it's a research interest of
Yeah.
some folks within the university to look at, hey, what isn't being burned, what's being wasted. And so, I mean, this is an interesting starting point just to see what the consumption is total. And then also to kind of consider, all right, so what isn't being burned that we are getting charged for?
Yeah, they might have a better handle on loss in the distribution before the meter, since that's their loss. I don't know if they would have a sense of. They'd probably refer to industry and academia what the numbers are. Sorry, Stacy, it's back on you. This is community kilowatt hour consumption. Fairly flat, a little bit of a rise though from 2015 to 2016. And as a reminder from last year, thanks to Todd, we have a methodology to kind of estimate the potable water portion. So in the protocols for calculating greenhouse gas emissions for entire community, they like to separate out potable water, gas and electric consumption, and wastewater gas and electric consumption. That's a little more difficult for us because we don't own those utilities. So we have some formulas that we derive the potable water consumption in the wastewater.
I think those came by. We talked with utilities directly, and they gave us their numbers.
I remember I was very pessimistic about the possibility that was going to happen, and you plowed ahead. You knew it could be done, and you were right. Moving on to municipal or city facilities. This is just what city-owned, Urbana-owned facilities use, so this building and others. The proportions there are buildings to lighting. So you can see lighting is about half of our electricity consumption. So street lights, not lighting in this room, that would fall under building, but street lights are about half of our consumption. Some years ago, any new streetlights that the city installed were LED. The prices had come to the point where that was an obvious choice. As I mentioned before, we're pursuing a guaranteed energy savings contract, and that would have the possibility, if the numbers are right, to retrofit our existing streetlights with LED lights. And that could be anywhere from a half to 2/3 reduction in the lighting proportion of this chart. So that would be a big project. At this point in time, I'm intending to give an informational presentation to Committee of the Whole next Monday next week. So feel free to attend or watch. So I'll be explaining that process and what it takes to go through that statutorily prescribed process and what we might get out of it.
From 2014 to 2016, it looks like there's an uptick kind of trend in terms of the building kilowatts per hour usage. Have there been any new facilities built, or you have any sort of understanding or sort of awareness of where that additional energy is now coming from, or being spent?
Yeah, it's not certain. It's interesting because, going back to the Energy Star Challenge, the Public Works building has they won the award for greatest Energy Star score improvement, which is interesting. So that they went from, I think it was 51 to 58 to 72 in the last 3 years for their Energy Star score. So that building had some new rooftop units installed. I think this building's had some new mechanical systems installed. So I know that we're improving our facilities, and of course anything new is going to be more efficient than what was in there before. One interesting piece for this building is the server room, which of course is a very hot room, used to have a once passed through water cooled system. So using potable water to cool the room. That was replaced maybe 2014, 2013 with an electric cooled system. So we saved a bunch of water, a lot of water, because it was once through. But that was an increase in the electric load for this building. So it's not certain what this uptick is. The lighting, in fact, if we're looking at the numbers, I think the lighting went up also just ever so slightly. I think that's probably attributable to the fact that there are places that have never been lit, and we've installed lighting in the last few years. So we're creating new demand there, even while we're being more efficient. So those new lights that went in were all LED, but they still have some demand.
Does Energy Star, like by using Portfolio Manager, have any sort of, do they have a category for cities to compare how well a city of a certain size is doing, or what your energy footprint is, instead of on a per building basis, but on a kind of like a campus basis, if you will, if you would consider like all the city buildings a campus? I'm just curious how this, these are interesting numbers, but how does this compare to other cities throughout the U.S. of similar size?
Sure. Energy Star does not. They do have a campus function, but the campus function is for a collection of buildings that are more or less on the same property. So the Quad would be, at the U of I, would be a campus. A corporate office park that had several buildings would be a campus. But that's different than, say, buildings scattered throughout a city. We could compare our energy use to other cities, but it's hard to be apples to apples because, for instance, if we compare ourselves to another city that has 43,000 residents and, let's say, 8 buildings, I think we have, but if one of their 8 buildings is a wastewater treatment plant, they're going to use a lot more energy than we are, even though all the other things seem, comparable. So the distinction between facilities, that some cities have, some don't, is enormous.
I think I have this sort of burning desire to understand, like, so how are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like that could be a question that may come up in city council, trying to get at, so what, I will let you finish your
Sure.
presentation
No, you're fine.
tonight,
It's
I
fine.
promise. But just getting at that sense of like, well, how is the city doing? Is this the right track that we need to be on? Have we met have we met our goals and metrics for where we want to be at this point in time? I guess like also gets into the climate action plan and knowing where y'all want to be with regard to 2020 or later. But anyway, sort of the yeah.
So I was just going to say, for the U of I, we always look at the energy use intensity, which divides by the gross square footage. And that's what the portfolio manager does too, is look at your energy per square foot. One of the awards from the challenge is the best improvement in energy use intensity. And so I think that it's not that hard to compare if we took this and divided by the square footage, which I don't know if you already have done that, at the whole, right? Because when we talk about our progress since the university's baseline of 2008, we do it by square footage. So even though we've expanded square footage, our energy use per square foot has gone down by over 27% or something. And so, but then if you did that and you got the EUI for the city facilities, you could, I mean, I can tell you all the ones that we use on campus. We have sort of a standard, this is what a typical classroom's like, this is what a typical office is like. And then, of course, the portfolio manager probably has some things in there too, or there might not be that hard to find one. Like we could ask Champaign for theirs.
At the
Or Savoy.
at the level of a portfolio of facilities, even if you go with energy use intensity, energy use per square foot, same problem. The energy use per square foot of an office building is completely different than the energy use per square foot of a wastewater treatment plant. You can't expect them to be equal. Take universities. If University of Illinois, my first alma mater, compared their energy use per square foot to Rollins College, my second alma mater, they would perform terribly because Rollins College is a liberal arts college. They don't have nearly the energy-intensive scientific facilities that the University of Illinois has. My guess is they would be a far better performer because it's basically classroom space.
But my point is that it is a number that people tend to use
Mm.
as opposed to just your bulk kilowatt hours. And even if, I mean, the EUI on campus ranges from 100 to 700, and so knowing what this is in that terminology, and then just giving here's sort of a baseline of what all these different kinds are, could just sort of where we're at, not necessarily what the target, how we're doing on the goal, but where we are.
Energy use intensity or Energy Star score for the buildings that are eligible to receive the Energy Star score compared building type to building type. So your classroom to U of I's classroom to Rollins classroom, that's an apples to apples comparison. One person's wastewater treatment facility to another person's wastewater treatment facility, that's a fair comparison. But when you start blending those, that's where you start, whoever's the poor performer is going to go, well, but wait, I have this facility and you don't. And it's a fair point. So if we compared, for instance, if we were to compare our public works to City of Champaign's public works, and in fact they're both in the challenge, and I can't remember the scores, the relative scores off the top of my head, that would be a fair comparison. Theirs might be more square foot, but we can compare the energy use per square foot. That's a very fair comparison.
Another way of doing a comparison is comparing a building to itself historically. And, when we're analyzing a portfolio, one of the things that we like to do is, so what we have up here right now is 100% of the entire portfolio. I think there's some past analysis on, individual buildings. So, one practice is to say, okay, there's a whole bunch of accounts, and maybe we don't want to dive into the weeds on every single building, but there's a relatively smaller subset that make up, say, 80% of the total consumption, and we could just focus on that red buildings portion. The lighting there's less to say about that, I think. And on the buildings, we could say, okay, well, what are the top 10 buildings that make up 80%? And so we could do benchmarks of, EUI compared with other, similar building. I mean, that's kind of that's Energy Star. But then the other thing is that we have historic data. And so then we can see, well, what are they doing in terms of just total, just gross consumption from year to year? And what do the trends look like? And we see the total, but it doesn't tell us the story of why or which where is it coming from?
I mean, it doesn't look like it went up in 15. It really went up in 16. And the heating degree days were lower in 16. But so maybe that's all from one building. Maybe if you looked at each building, there's only one that went up, and then you can go and see what happened, right? Like if something, it's like the ones through water cooling. You can dig into it. But then how does it apply to the presentation on Monday?
Well, I think Stacy asked a very good question. Someone is going to say, well, what's our goal? Are we meeting it? Someone may ask, where do we stand? What's going right? What's going wrong? Those are great questions to prepare for. In terms of so we don't have a municipal facilities only greenhouse gas goal. We have a community-wide greenhouse gas reduction goal, so 25% by 2020. We don't have a 2016 greenhouse gas inventory because we're doing them every other year. So in that sense, there's nothing new to say from 2015, but of course, who remembers what was said in 2015? I'm going off of my own memory now. I think actually that answer is essentially copy and pasted from last year's annual report, and I think it's on the page that shows the the community energy consumption. I think in the additional information bar, it may say, I think it's something like 12% community reduction in greenhouse gases from our 2007 baseline, and most of that attributed to the purchase of renewable energy credits through municipal electric aggregation. The important point there is if in the future you stop buying the credits with your electricity supply, most of that 12% evaporates for the next year. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking. I'll make sure to prepare for that. But I think that's the answer, and I think it is in the annual report. And I'm going through for the presentation. I'm going through the report and thinking, okay, well, what more is behind this chart that I can put in the presentation? And so I didn't put anything like our portfolio manager statement of energy performance for each building. If there's time, we can log into Portfolio Manager online and look at each individual city building. I can recall, because I won an award, that the Public Works has been improving their Energy Star score, which is related to, but not exactly the same as their energy use intensity. But when you see that big of an increase in the Energy Star score, it probably also means that their energy use intensity has been going down. And like I said, they had some new rooftop units in the last year. But obviously, some other buildings are using more energy, more kilowatts. City facilities total therms. So there's not a stacked area graph here because lighting doesn't use any gas. So it's just buildings.
Not anymore.
Do you have old-fashioned gas lamps on campus?
Not anymore.
Coal gasified lamps?
Actually, I'm wondering if this drop in natural gas, if maybe there was something that was a natural gas system that switched to electricity, which would reduce emissions because the facilities aren't the city facilities on the aggregation program. So electrification right now is a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions.
City facilities are bid out on their own fixed contract price.
Oh, right. They're not in that program.
And
Okay.
I think we signed a 3-year agreement for that as well. I would think so. I don't think that we've changed any gas-powered systems to electric. So the city, by virtue of owning the right-of-way, was part of I think it was a 50-year franchise agreement for Ameren to use the right-of-way for gas. And in the past, that provided a discount on the purchase of a gas for city facilities. And so in the past, there wasn't a lot of incentive to be more efficient with gas. I think that agreement has expired. There's a new one, and it doesn't give us an incentive for gas. And now we're, have the same incentives to be efficient with gas as everyone else. But that means that I don't think in the past we've switched systems from gas to electric. Basically what we have is heating and water heating. I'm not sure that we have anything else. I can't think of anything else that's gas powered. And here's city facilities greenhouse gas emissions. again, buildings and lighting are the biggest. Vehicle fleet, also substantial, at least compared to solid waste, is fairly minimal. Vehicle fleet is one that we're chipping away at. So it's in the annual report. We purchased our first full electric vehicle. And I talk to the fleet manager regularly. We're always discussing what new electric vehicles are on the market and what job types those would be useful and appropriate for. And so we're going to keep looking at improving the energy efficiency of our fleet every time we purchase a new vehicle. Onto water. This is community water consumption. It came up a little bit last year and now flat, so it looks like we've kind of hit a plateau maybe. We are plateaued at a very low rate. Our per capita water consumption is extremely low. Proportionally, commercial is the largest. And here's the per capita. So total per capita is just industrial, commercial, residential divided by our population. Residential per capita is residential water consumption divided by per capita. So that something like 38 gallons per day is very low. I think when you keyword search on the internet, you get more like 70. So very low. Nationally. And we're going to keep doing the rain barrel sale as long as there's enough sales to keep vendors bidding. And so that's another way that we're displacing what would probably otherwise be potable water use on landscaping with captured stormwater. City facilities water consumption also came up last year and then again plateaued a little bit. Very good improvements from the Arbor Division on limiting irrigation water. We believe that most of that comes from maintenance of broken irrigation systems. So just being on top of finding and fixing those leaks when they occur. Status, I think I've shared this in a report before, but status of designated uses of our 4 surface waters that are listed in the state's report.
So there's 4 of them. So how is it percentage? What's the denominator on your percentage? Do you know?
I don't remember. I'd have to go back into the...
Yeah, because if there's only 4, then it's not out of 4. It's not one of them is fully supporting and one is not supporting and 2 are not assessed. The math doesn't, so.
Yeah, I'll have to go back
Just
into...
check that. There might be surface area of them or something.
It may be that an individual, what we would think of as a surface water, may have 2 segments. I know that individual streams have more than one segment that gets, assessed. I don't know if that's the issue here or not.
Maybe just take out the word 4. Because that's the part that...
Be more vague. Waste diversion. I think our composting and our recycling was essentially flat. The specific numbers are in the annual report. I think we're 31% recycling or 31% diversion the last 2 years. So we're flat there. But the amount of waste landfilled went up. These are numbers, well, the landfilled volumes come from annual reports that licensed haulers provide. So the way that they So they're not metering, they're not scaling in only the waste that comes from Urbana. There's some estimating that's going on there. So there's some fuzziness in this data, and we just hope that however the license haulers are deriving these numbers, that they're deriving them consistently in that way. So at least the trend is accurate. Yeah, 31% diversion rate in the last couple of years.
So I think we talked about this last year, and just observing the trend of diversion rate over the years. I don't know. Any other thoughts on it this time around? Have any? I remember there was maybe some thought about some of the construction and demolition debris, or are there other communities that are seeing similar kinds of trends, or I don't know. Anything new here?
Nothing new. Something to consider is with economic recovery, you're probably folks are going to buy more stuff and create more waste, most likely. So whether that is what we can attribute this trend to or not, it's hard to say. We could do a little looking to see if what other cities are reporting. It can be, oftentimes other cities our size don't have the report. They don't collect the data. Cities that do collect the data are Portland and Washington, D.C. and Chicago, and it's helpful, but
A little different.
yeah.
I'll tell you, on campus, we're about 30% diversion rate right now from within a building. So the campus buildings, the waste from that is either recycle. If you throw it in a garbage can, then it's either going to go through the recycling program or to the landfill. And about 30% of the stuff that goes into the garbage cans are recycled. So it matches what we're seeing on campus, and we're going to be highly promoting use the recycling bins in order to get more personal responsibility of the behavior. And maybe there's something that the university and the city could do together to just increase the culture of recycling. Maybe.
When I look at these numbers, a different number which we can't get, it would be what percentage of all the aluminum and plastic bottles and paper and cardboard that is generated is being recycled. If those numbers are high, that's great. Then let's presume that they're fairly high. Then it's a question of, all right, what is the other 2/3 of the waste stream? Well, some significant portion is construction and demolition waste. We have a new private construction and demolition waste facility open, so that's now a great option. It's across the street from the transfer station, so in terms of a transportation cost, there's no additional transportation cost for the generators. Another proportion is food scrap, and that's a service we don't offer. It's a service that would cost money, probably either as a fee like a U-Cycle fee, or as a service, opt-in service. And so then if you have food scrap, what is that? Another 10%, 20%, 30%? Not sure. And then you ask the question, what's left? You get to the point where you get to the last little bits of really hard to recycle materials, and the price goes up per pound to recycle them. And at that point, once you get past, say, all the commodities recycling that we already do, food scrap, which we don't do at this point, then you start comparing whether it's more important to remove the hazardous materials, even though they're a very small proportion, rather than the last little bit of, say, polystyrene or styrofoam. What keeps me up at night about what's going in the landfill is not the more inert materials or a bit of cardboard that didn't get collected, but household hazardous waste, which is not supposed to go in the landfill, but there's no other place to put it. So the county has some studies and a toolkit and a plan for developing a household hazardous waste facility, and they're looking at how to move to the next steps of that plan presently. And I think that's really important. If polystyrene leaks into our aquifer, I'm not sure that does anything, but if hazardous wastes leak into our aquifer, now we have to clean that up before we can use that water.
Can you add units to this slide?
Oh yeah,
Okay, thanks.
it's tons. So we talked about participation. We're still developing that and updating that participation rate. Probably we'll have that this week. So that's the proportion of all the recycling that we do through the 2 U-Cycle programs. So these trucks that collect this recycling only collect U-Cycle recycling. They don't go to Champaign. They don't pick up from private facilities. So these numbers should be more precise than the type of numbers that we get from licensed haulers who could go from one city to the next, from commercial to residential on the same route. Our battery recycling. So essentially flat. Some notes about our battery recycling. We pay to have alkaline single-use batteries and a few specialty batteries recycled. We get paid for most of the rechargeable batteries. They have more valuable metals to recover. Additionally, rechargeable batteries, in terms of a life cycle, should be a lot cheaper because you can reuse them over and over again. So if we encourage folks to use rechargeable batteries instead of single-use, they should save money, and the city should save money. I think we spend somewhere on the order of $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year on battery recycling costs. We have, I think it's 6 drop locations for battery recycling. There's one here. Staff collects those weekly and bulks them into 55-gallon drums. As far as we know, there isn't a really significant battery collection going on in other places. I think there are maybe a few churches and that sort of thing that have mail-in buckets, but there's no other cities collecting batteries, which means we're probably collecting batteries for other cities' residents as well as our own.
Does the staff separate it between the rechargeable and you just send them all to the same place?
The vendor sorts and then bills us per pound per type.
Do you still do the taping of the 9-volt batteries?
For safety, the batteries are supposed to be taped on the end. Many are not.
So when somebody drops off batteries, they need to tape the end?
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to ask.
So we don't talk about it a lot, but nuisance control, nuisance inspections is also done in the Environmental Sustainability Division. So nuisances for us are all nuisances outside of the building. So not building code violations, but unmowed grass, noxious weeds, and garbage not collected or on the ground. So this is, we also, the same position also enforces the sidewalk snow removal ordinance. That's a very small number of complaints and inspections and follow-ups every year, so we don't really track that. And, it's a short season. You're talking on the order of single digits some seasons. So what we're focusing on here are complaints for garbage. So garbage, household garbage or commercial generated garbage that is not being picked up for weeks on end. And vegetation nuisances, which could be an abandoned house or a house that's been foreclosed and no one's taking care of the lawn. It could be someone who's gone to Florida for the season, but then there's an early spring and they forgot to call someone to mow their lawn before they come back. Could be nuisance vegetation. There's a state list of noxious weeds. So those are prohibited from being allowed on your property. That doesn't mean that if a person has one thistle in the lawn, we're going to do anything about it. But if the whole lawn is thistles, okay, that's on the noxious weed list. Or ragweed is another one because it's such a terrible allergen. Those are inspections we do there. So here you see, the total and the proportion. We're focusing on always thinking about different ways to get compliance with these ordinances earlier in the process of enforcement. So if we can bump into a property owner and talk to them and resolve the issue, great. If it's a managed property that has the property management company's name on a sign and we can call them and resolve the issue, great. If we send them a citation letter and they resolve the violation, great. What we want the least is to have to abate the nuisance ourselves, which means we have term contracts for hiring a company that's going to mow an abandoned property. And, an abandoned property, you're not mowing it once, you're going to mow it for the whole season until it's sold, typically. For garbage, it happens often since we don't have municipal or franchise garbage collection. It happens that someone will be renting a property, move from the property, and decide that they'd rather save the last month's garbage collection fees. And so they leave their municipal waste for the last month of their lease, move away, and then we get a call for garbage on the ground. Again, with private garbage collection, if the property owner or the tenant is not paying the garbage man, then they're not picking up the garbage. So those are the sort of issues that the nuisance inspector deals with on a day-to-day basis.
So in this annual total, would you count all of those when you were talking about being able to say something, or sort of when does it go on this list? And if you say something and then you send them a letter and then you have to abate it, is that 3 or is that 1? And
So
if it's the same place that you mow 5 times, is that 1 or 5?
Good question. This is all valid complaints. So sometimes we'll get a call and we inspect and it's not a violation. For instance, if there is 1 candy wrapper on someone's lawn, that's litter, that's not nuisance refuse. And we cannot send a violation letter for every piece of litter on every property. So that would be invalid. That would be recorded because we got a call, we did an inspection, but it would be recorded as invalid. The number of invalid is very, very low. So this is all valid complaints. If the inspector bumps into the property owner, talks to them, he may not record it. He may swing by later in the week and find that it was resolved. That may not get recorded. But generally, that doesn't happen often because if it's a residence, people are typically not home. They're at work or whatever. If it's a commercial building, it may be rented by commercial tenants, separate from the property owner who we need to talk to. But this is valid complaints, typically ones that get a letter. This is not the total number of abatements. The number of properties we abate is far lower. So this is nuisances by resolution. Well, to your question, owner abated means they got a letter and they took care of it and we re-inspected and it was fine. City abated means they got a letter, they got their apportioned time to resolve the nuisance, It was not resolved, and so the city had to hire a contractor to mow the lawn or remove the garbage. We don't want that. There's the market for on-call lawn mowing, on-call garbage collection is very small and very expensive. And ultimately, those costs are put back on the property owner as a bill and eventually as a lien. All of which costs us labor time and lawyer time. We don't want that at all. So we're always working on ways to reduce the city abated. That's not what we want.
There was a recent article in the News Gazette about rats being increasing in Urbana, and I don't know that discussion fits into the whole context of the presentation that we're trying to get through right now, but it is really hard if someone calls in a nuisance call. There's a rat on your property right now. Someone comes out to inspect it. Chances are that rat's not going to be there, right, when they get there. So I guess is there could that be like a discussion that the Sustainability Advisory Council has at some point in order to make some recommendations on things that we can encourage folks to do to reduce habitats for rats and mice and other little critters? I know that the News Gazette article kind of said something a little tongue-in-cheek, and it was a little bit funny, but
To the best of my knowledge, one person at a public meeting said they had rats on their property in their house. I've never heard anyone else say they've seen a rat in many years in Urbana. I've heard lots of people reference the News Gazette story, which referenced one person at one public meeting, say that they had rats at their property. What we do to ensure that garbage is being collected every week from every occupied property is to prevent nuisances like mosquito breeding and nuisance rodents. That's the whole purpose. And so we're going to keep doing that and keep working on getting a higher proportion of owner abated. Oh, I should have expanded that one. Adopt Urbana volunteer hours. Fairly steady. We're always open to new groups who want to commit to at least 2 cleanups from a particular location, so some street side location. We're getting a lot of support from the county probation office. There's always folks who have public service hours, and we're really happy to work with them to provide hours for folks and clean up litter in our community. So really pleased with that. That typically is not actually included in this chart. The probation public service workers, they typically have a certain number of hours, and they collect garbage or do other community service for the hours they need. And so it tends not to be a routine thing. It waxes and wanes. So we don't collect that in Adopt Urbana. This is really only community groups who pledge to a particular location at least twice a year.
I'd be interested in knowing the number of groups that are assigned and the amount of hours per group, and maybe the number of people in each group or something like that.
I do have some additional numbers for that. So I think we have the number of people in each event, and then the number of pounds. It's all estimated. It's a garbage bag, but the number of pounds, and then you get pounds per capita and all that sort of thing. I'm not sure we've ever added up the number of groups, but probably it's a small number. We could do that easily. But yeah, we have some of that data behind the scenes. Can share it. Yeah. Any questions on that? Any questions on the annual report?
Can you go back to the slide about electricity for the city facilities? I think that one of them doesn't have the 0 at the bottom. That one, therms.
Mm.
And I don't know if there's a way to highlight that that's not, because most of them do. What about the one right before that? Okay, so it's just the therms.
Yeah.
And so since all of the others do have the 0
Mhm.
baseline,
Probably if I change this to an area graph, it would probably start at 0. It seems like all the others do.
well, you can also, in Excel, you can click on that axis and tell it to do
True.
0. Which takes severe persistence and determination, modifying Excel charts.
Other questions?
I have several, and I can just drop this off with you
Sure.
afterwards rather than go through them all. But is the picture on the cover a solar power hour?
It is.
Okay. So I don't think it would be a terrible idea to sneak a caption on there, even though it's the cover. And because I'm not sure the feature that we've given last year's solar project, the prominence it should have. It's one of, I'd say, the signature accomplishments. I mean, I realize I really like our declining greenhouse gas emissions as well, and that's related to the RECs that we're purchasing through the city's program. But the solar thing, and we're renewing it, it's been transformative. It's been recognized. We had great numbers compared, around the Midwest and everything, and I think
Yeah.
we ought to hang some attention on
Would
that.
it make sense on maybe the table of contents page, or there's no table of contents? I cut that. It's
No.
not needed. Yeah, I could just maybe do a photo credit right under the photo.
It would start, and then I have some recommendations on making the featured project, just a little, making a little more out of that space.
Sure.
Or considering just doing a page on it. I mean, I realize that's a little, trying to be economical with your page count, but that's a great program, and it's a continuing one. So I have a few just typos and things that aren't really a big deal. On the awards and grants page, which wasn't part of your presentation but is part of the, okay. I just want to make sure you're claiming stuff that may be ongoing, so elsewhere, I mean, do we have any certifications or designations or programs that are ongoing and are still considered current that we could badge ourselves with here?
Well, I have been asking for several months for status check and approval of our compliance with the Compact of Mayors.
Okay.
And the reply is always, we're reviewing it.
Okay.
I would love to be able to say we're a compliant city,
Yeah.
because I've seen press releases of cities that got their compliance and they put that out there. We're compliant. We've done everything. It's just
Okay.
haven't been told so.
So that was one of the ones I pinged here, was the Mayor's Accord, or that agreement. Bicycle-friendly community. Now, maybe that's not ours. Maybe that relates to our transportation plan. I think it's current. I think it's okay. Anything that ICLEI has designated us, or do we have a current
That's
membership?
actually the Compact of Mayors is
related.
yeah, it's all integrated. I think they actually do the work on it. Even I think Bloomberg started it, and then ICLEI is really the staff for it.
Okay. And if I listen closely, I'd know the answer to this, but do we have anything that we can claim about Energy Star for any of the city's buildings?
We're real close with
Okay.
Public Works. We're
Yeah.
72. We need to get 75 out
All
of
right.
100.
Yeah, so that's close.
Yeah.
But you could still list that we won the challenge.
Okay.
And that we
Yeah.
led the
I
program.
mean, so I run the challenge. Is that a little self-serving? Give myself an award and
No,
then
that's-
praise myself for it.
But,
That you lead it is a leadership
Yeah, it's
thing
okay.
that we do for the broader community.
For awards, has Urbana done the Illinois Sustainability Awards?
We haven't won one. They just opened, right, last week, and I'm going to take a look at that and potentially apply maybe for Solar UC.
Okay, and another thought was, elsewhere we report historic, metrics. So again, on this awards and grants page, is it appropriate to list historic grants and awards, by year? To go back and just have it on a page, but say, we've been doing this since 2007, here's what we racked up. Now, they may not, I don't know, it's just a thought. And an additional thought is it appropriate to list your very productive outreach and conference schedules and those sort of outputs or involvements? I'm just wondering.
Like public engagement.
Yeah.
is, typically.
Yeah, as a metric. I don't know how laborious it would be to rack that up, or line that up, but every time you do that, that's reputational enhancement for the city of Urbana, and it's spreading your good work to other parties. So it's just a thought.
Potentially, I don't think I keep a master list of that. I sort of drop it in
Mhm.
the monthly report.
Mhm.
So that's a thought, yeah.
Yeah, you could just audit those and just rack them up and say, hey, over the course of the year, I had 20 or whatever it was appearances.
Also, if you have metrics on number of attendees or like group, like number from different organizations, or that'd be interesting too.
Yeah, I don't. Typically, when it's a sustainability type presentation at a conference that's not sustainability, it's a small group presentation. But I've never kept that kind of data. It's a good thought.
And please don't think this is self-serving, but I remember this last year too. Was wondering if there's any place in this report for listing or the commission and your work to staff this commission. We're sort of in the sphere where we've helped shape and guide this work for the city, and certainly a lot of your time, has been spent staffing and implementing, and we're involved in having developed or guiding some of this. So it's a thought, is that somewhere in the report?
Maybe the second page where there's a paragraph on the division.
Yeah, and again, I don't know what's typically done with other commissions and other annual reports, or if this is kind of unique.
Yeah. Well, the market, of course, has the best annual report. Food and people and music. They have all the great photo ops. So I'm always jealous of their report.
Let's just claim them as a subset of our
Yeah.
carbon footprint reduction outreach. The last thing is the final pages, at least of this hard copy, kind of go into do they reproduce the plan?
I export, so there's some extra pages in my in my design file, and those are not supposed to be exported. They're just where I drop images that I'm working with. So yeah, I'll cut those when it goes to council.
Okay. So right now the awards and grants page is
That's
the
the
last
final.
page?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great. Good work on this.
Anything else? I had one question, which is, it's peripheral to the present. It's peripheral to the presentation, but early in there, you present the budget for public works, and so there's a couple items that just raised a question in my mind. And if you could go up to the to that breakdown, it's up towards the top. Okay, yeah, this one. So, we talk about, in this body, we're interested in energy and water in the city, and waste as well. And, some of the times we kind of reflect on, the challenges of trying to affect change where the city itself doesn't have a direct influence. And so, I just looking at this reminds me that there are, we do talk about city, we do talk about the city buildings, say, for example, like, the discussion around energy and water consumption in city facilities. So, like on this budget, one item is like the, capital replacement and capital improvement budget. And, doing investments in say whether it's efficiency or sustainability, you know, that capital stage is a big leverage point for making those kinds of improvements, and a lot of times is a lot more cost effective than the retrofit case. And so I guess what it gets me just wondering, is there an opportunity for us to hear a presentation on, say, capital plan, whether it's in draft stage or getting closer to ready to be presented as the capital plan for the upcoming year, and then just as an opportunity to kind of look at, well, are there leverage points or water, energy, waste ideas that might come out of some discussion and inspection of the capital improvement process.
Yeah, and that's a good thought, and maybe even more important would be a capital projects that are farther in the future, or they haven't already been designed and budgeted.
Exactly.
And,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Before it's when it's going to council, it's a little late.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Okay. Next item on new business is the National Renewable Energy Laboratory analysis on solar.
So this is a slide deck that was presented to me by the National Renewable Energy Lab, and I've asked Todd to jump in and intercede whenever he feels, because some of it is technical and he may be able to help. So as part of the SolSmart initiative that we're participating in, NREL conducted an evaluation of the fire station on North Lincoln that the city owns, and they looked at the viability of PV, solar electricity, as well as storage. And so I will share with you what they shared with me. I've had this for a long time, so I actually had to review it today and try and remember all the details. I haven't shared it for a couple of reasons. One, the evaluation that they did evolved a little bit over time as we developed the project. Two, I was hoping to get another study of this sort done on another facility, but they're encouraging the city to finish up completing a SolSmart designation before they provide any more technical assistance. I believe we have more than enough points to receive a SolSmart designation, accepting that there are certain subcategories that themselves have minimum points. And so we are short in the planning, zoning, permitting, development type category for SolSmart. SolSmart is a set of best practices to encourage solar energy development in your city. And so the planning division has a number of text amendments in the zoning and subdivision ordinances they're interested in. They are just working on, finding staff time to finish those up and take them to Plan Commission and approve them. So hopefully when that happens, we may be able to do this sort of analysis again on another facility. So that's it. They use a particular tool, modeling tool of some sort, to evaluate solar plus storage viability. And it has a number of parameters. Some of them are fixed, some of them are user inputs. One of the user inputs it mentions here is how you want battery backup. Well, how many days worth of battery backup do you want for this facility? And so I took their recommendation and said 3 days. A little bit about SolSmart. Hopefully will be a pin on their map this year. So this is the facility. This is the North Fire Station on Lincoln. These are the two roofs on this facility. One has already been replaced last year. One might be under construction right now, or maybe just finished, or soon to start construction. So this facility is going to have brand new roofs. Great time to put solar panels on it. Pretty wordy, but here's a bunch of the inputs. They modeled the load, 50% warehouse, 50% mid-rise apartment. Why mid-rise apartment? Well, it has residential facilities because it's a fire station. Utility costs. We're on a term contract with a flat electricity rate. They also modeled Ameren's real-time pricing. You'll see that later. A discounting rate. We used the average total installed cost for solar from Solar UC last year. That was $344 a watt. Probably we will see a lower total installed cost this year. So that's one that we can adjust if we run this analysis again. We're looking at solar PV plus electricity storage. The ownership model is PPA. So if you go down to incentives, because it's third-party ownership, the tax incentives are in play. So the power purchase agreement holder would be able to monetize those tax incentives. And we presumed some value for SREC sales. The first 5 years of SREC sales, you'll recall that we innovated that model for a PPA with the PPA solar array that's going next to the Arbor Shop this month. Historic escalation rates. People throw around different numbers, usually 2 to 4%. I went and looked at some historic pricing, just the actual supply cost, not all the other incidentals, and it was exactly 3% for Ameren. So I think we're pretty safe there. Inflation. And then we're modeling that if power is lost to the facility, the electrical would be set up so that some devices are powered with the battery backup and some are not. So maybe, maybe I don't know what it wouldn't be, but maybe lights in the bay are not powered, but the ice machine is, or the AC is. So we're modeling 65% of the load would be powered in a battery backup scenario, and then 3 days. This is our actual electricity bills, so we just ported that over to NREL. This is simulated annual load. This is a DS2 facility. That's a type of electric service, commercial scale electric service. DS2 does not receive hourly pricing data. They don't have that kind of meter, I presume. We don't get that kind of data. DS3 is now available hourly download from Ameren's website, which is really nice. So they're modeling hourly pricing in this tool.
Is that daylight savings time kicking in? That little shift?
That's a model. That's a model assumption of when the air conditioning turns on, I suspect.
Well, clearly air conditioning, right?
Yeah.
Later in the year. I mean that little shift in the spring. It goes from roughly 4.
No, because those are kilowatts. That's not the time.
Those are daily kilowatt peaks, peaks and troughs.
Uh-huh.
For 365 days.
Yeah. So springtime. Well, that could be a
It jumps into
simulated
daylight.
reduction in things like fan usage for the
for the
pushing the heating,
Yeah.
pushing the heating out to the facility.
Good answer. Thanks.
Could you go back to that assumption page? I think there's a couple of things to call out on the. So I think some really critical assumptions here where, and I know that it's a detailed model and it's probably a lot to ask them to go back and forth and do more stuff, but just to call out some I think critical assumptions here. The electric load assumption that's a really important assumption because along with the critical load percentage, because that has implications for the battery storage sizing, and so that's one. I think another really important one is the value of the resiliency. You know, is there some? Are we able to put some, whether it's monetary or some non-monetary value, on being able to keep this place up and running? And I guess if you're, you know, since it's also looking at, well, you know, a diesel or, you know, a generator, then I guess the net between the two is zero, because they're both getting that.
I'm going to talk about that a little later.
Okay.
Because this facility currently, I don't think it has a generator.
Okay.
They're interested in a generator.
Okay.
So we get to play
Okay.
with all of that. But
Yeah.
yeah, we started out with zero value. But of
Mhm.
course, it has a value. How do you assign value to that? I don't know exactly.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
you'll see that is very important.
Yeah.
You'll see later.
And then just the last one is the resiliency requirement. You know, the number of days. Obviously, that has implications for, if we're talking about a storage. Well, how many batteries do you have to use? You know, how many kilowatt hours do you actually have to be able to store? And you know, I don't know availability of data on downtime. You know, grid downtime. And
I looked for that and I could not find it.
Yeah, I know it's hard to find, and you know, if you ask people for anecdotal, it's good luck getting anything useful out of that. But anyways, just
Yeah, and I think it's highly bifurcated. So if a tornado hits town, weeks and months, totally different than the 2 or 3 incidences a year. I couldn't even get a number of down days, you know, a year. But you know, a few days a year, you lose power for less than 24 hours. Which one are you going for? 3 months or 3 hours? Very, very different, you know, scenario.
You know, this is interesting because it's a fire station, right? I mean, if you're talking about for your home, you're probably just handling the scenario for a you know, the 1 day scenario. You know, 3 days is plenty for my house. You know, if they're not going to get the grid back up in 3 days, because you can tell because there was a tornado and it knocked down everything else. You know, find another solution. But a fire station is something that we're trying to, you know, that's where I might call if you know, if it's in my house, right? I'm expecting their help, and so I think the value there and the time commitment there is very, very different.
Yeah.
And it drags into the resilience discussions that the university's trying to kick off in April.
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to get perception from the fire chief on what the critical loads are, like communication equipment. I'm sure that's got to have that, and then whatever they got to do to, you know, keep the machines up and running and all that kind of stuff, and if they have to sacrifice some comfort inside, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
And you know, one exercise that could be gone through would be kind of if ignorance is not real, but a veil of ignorance. Like, let's not talk about what the actual cost of a generator is. Pretend you don't know. Pretend that, you know, next year you're going to have 3 outages of 1 day. What's it worth to you to have power? Is it, you know, $1,000 a year over 25 years? Is it $500 a year over 20? Let's put a number to it. At some point, someone will say, yeah, you know, I have a budget, and that's just not in my budget. Okay, that's the limit of the value, right? And in that way, we could say, okay, now we know what the value of resiliency is. But we started with 0 just to keep it simple, so we wouldn't have to argue over, well, why did you say 10,000 instead of 15,000? You know.
I can't not say the resiliency part, the value of resiliency. I mean, you could start looking at the financial models for traffic improvements. So if you look at a traffic, if you do a grant request to fix a street up, they want to know the crash history and the and they assign a value for the impacts of those crashes, whether it was property damage only all the way up to a fatality. And there's a specific number associated with that. So now you've got a dollar figure that is in the benefit side of fixing this based on the expected reduction in future crashes. And I mean, this is the fire station, right? So you could get how often are there fires and how many would be controlled. I mean, there's just coming from the other side of what the need is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Well, suffice it to say, assigning value to resiliency is important. So some details. I mentioned it's a DS2 tariff. No demand charges. Demand charges, it sounds like NREL's model can take account of demand charges, which would be great. We do own, I think, just one DS3 facility. It's this facility is on a DS3 tariff, has demand charges. It's not clear. I don't think all the solar installers out there are modeling whether they're going to reduce demand charges, but maybe NREL can. So I'm hoping that we can get this SolSmart designation and then invite them to model this building too for solar plus storage. So there's a breakdown of the charges, a little over 9 cents a kilowatt hour, volumetric. So they modeled 3 different scenarios. PV and battery, size to lower 25-year cost of energy. So, what makes sense from a dollars and cents? Net present value's got to be positive. 2 is PV and battery size to survive 3-day outage. If we want solar and we want battery backup for a 3-day outage, what is the cost? And then the third is PV and generator size, so generated backup instead of battery backup. So that's where you're really comparing a scenario we might actually face, which is we really want backup power at this facility. Are we going to buy a generator or are we going to buy a battery backup? So base case is what we're doing now. We don't have solar and we don't have backup of any sort, so we're just paying the power bill. So 25 years, right? This is all on 25-year timeline. You see how much electricity we would use, right? With PV, so it says cost-effective PV plus storage, and then you'll see in the storage, the battery cost line, it's 0. There's no cost because there is no cost-effective PV plus storage compared to our baseline. Our baseline being that fixed electricity cost. But essentially what they're doing is they're cutting the storage from this number 1 here, and they're saying, okay, what if this facility has this fixed electricity cost and we put PV on it? Net present value is slightly positive over 25 years. You may recall the power purchase agreement where we sell, again, this is selling first 5 years of SRECs. The power purchase agreement we actually signed for the Arbor Shop where we sold the first 5 years of SRECs at about a $4,000 positive 25-year net present value. So this is essentially in the same order, a little bit more. Is that all clear? Next. Oh, this is a slide for Todd to interpret, the spiky bed slide.
This shows the balance of consumption, production, and import from the grid. So it looks like the total amount is the hourly demand from the building, and the red amount, it looks like, is the oh, this is July. Okay, so this is 1 month. So that red stuff is what the PV is exporting to the grid. That's excess to. That's excess.
So that's our meter running backwards that we get credited for.
That's your meter running backwards. So the first thing I said about this is total demand is not right. So there's your. Oh, there's a line on there. Oh, there's the line that says what the load is. Okay. Yeah. So then the gray part you see when there's no red, then you see gray, because the grid is meeting the load there.
So is the model having like a cloudy day there on that one odd day with no exports?
Maybe.
Yeah, that could
and-
be.
And does the battery play a role here, Todd, or not at all? The battery is just a backup.
This
is it-
If you recall, I presume that this relates to this number one, where there is no battery because battery is not cost effective.
Okay. It
So-
says at the top of this slide.
Yeah.
I kept
Yeah.
asking them about this. I've looked at these slides 3 times, and I
Yeah.
keep learning more every time. But yeah, they keep calling it the cost-effective PV plus battery scenario.
I see.
But it's confusing because there's no battery in the
It
scenario.
dropped out of the battery.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's no.
Steve, about a week in, maybe 9 days in, one of the red spikes is actually it's really clearly 2 spikes. That'd be the cloud cover coming through in the middle of the day.
Nice. Yeah. Maybe a bird flying over. No. A really big bird.
This comes from a standard weather data set.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Methodology for sizing PV plus battery for a 3-day outage. So what I think you're going to see is, with the battery cost actually in there, what is the cost, not is it cost effective? Yeah, not a lot of detail on that one. Some more charts for Todd to interpret.
Details.
Yeah, there's a couple of these more. Here's, the good stuff. So same 0 and 1, a new number 2 case. PV storage for outage. Okay, go to the battery cost line. $72,000 cost for the battery. Go to the bottom. Remember, the solar alone is a positive $8,000 net present value. PV plus storage is a negative $80,000 net present value. So this is solar selling 5 years of SRECs and comparing to a base case of a fixed electricity price escalating at 3% a year for 25 years. So here, in that scenario, the comparison of the base price is essentially gives you a cost of battery storage of $80,000 over 25 years.
And this is where the sensitivity analysis on some of those assumptions becomes really important. I mean, that's a pretty large net present value on the negative side, but it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see how sensitive the result is to some of those assumptions.
Next, more details. Next, case 3. Fixed electricity price, 3% annual escalation, 25 years. Solar, power purchase agreement, selling first 5 years of SRECs, and a diesel generator backup. The diesel cost is $12,000 versus the $72,000 for the battery backup, and has just a few $1,000s in lifetime cost for that 25-year. The net present value for that is negative $16,000. So presumably the positive of the solar is balancing against the costs of the diesel. So now, if you're the operator of this facility or a community member who thinks that that's a good idea to have the fire station open for business and powered every day of the year, now you're thinking $16,000 for over 25 years. That might be worth the cost of always having power for at least a 3-day, or however long you can fuel a diesel generator. In fact, much lower number. Also, all these scenarios that you're looking at are fixed electricity cost, 25 years, 3% escalation, selling first 5 years of SRECs. So if you're looking at this, solar plus diesel, right? That's the way to go. some more details. The carbonation graph. You want to interpret that one? Oh, this is about, this is where we're switching gears here. So everything up to here has been, as I've said several times, fixed electricity costs, 3% annual escalation, 25 years. Now they're looking at Ameren's real-time pricing costs, where in the moment you pay the market cost at that moment. Base case. So just the base case, remember we would pay compared to the previous base case of a fixed price, they expect we'd pay $62,000 in electricity over 25 years. With the real-time pricing, they're saying that we would pay half that. So for even not thinking about solar or backup, it seems that we should be seriously considering real-time pricing for this facility. I don't know if the same is true of other facilities. This facility has nighttime use because people are living there waiting for a fire call. Maybe it's not the same for this facility where it's, other than these meetings, it's kind of dark at night. But that's really interesting.
And that's where that the model of what the actual hourly consumption is becomes really important. Is what they model represent what's real there.
And the other thing is, I presume we can get real-time pricing for a DS2. I presume they'd have to put in a new meter, right? Because there's not an hourly meter there. Because they don't have, presumably, because they are not giving me hourly data. So presumably they'd be willing to put in the meter and give us that tariff. It's worth exploring if we can cut that energy bill in half, right? Also interesting, cost-effective PV plus storage. Again, I don't think there's there's no battery cost there because it's not cost-effective. But the solar seems to perform worse. And I'm not sure why that is. So before it was a positive $8,000 net present value. Now it's negative 21.
That's the net present value. It's
Oh.
the differential. So since you've cut your
You're right.
your regular cost, the actual PV cost should be the same there.
You're right. I was thinking of comparing it to the fixed price base case, but here they're probably comparing it to the real-time pricing base case, right?
And it might also be that the real-time hourly rate at those peak rates, where you think you would be getting a good deal because you're offsetting the expensive rates, maybe that peak rate isn't so high to offset we saw 2 cents per kilowatt hour during those overnight periods.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. Something to consider. Let's go to the next one. I guess that's it. So when we start looking at, the other thing to think about is in the other, so this, compared to the base case of 0, negative net present value 21,000 doesn't sound great, but if we go back to a negative 80,000, that's a big difference. Now, again, if we think, what's the value? What is the fire station value? How much do they value backup power? What they didn't model here is diesel backup with real-time pricing. That's the additional comparison that I think we need here, because right now what we're looking at is fixed price solar plus diesel is a negative net present value of 16,000. Maybe it's worth having the backup at that price, versus real-time pricing, solar plus storage plus battery at negative 21,000. Well, if the real comparison is, and it's not, but if the real comparison was diesel backup at 16,000 or battery backup at 21,000, you might pay a couple thousand more over 25 years to have clean backup, right?
Can you go to the slide that showed the diesel? It had, that one.
See, this isn't a fair comparison.
Can you talk about just
but-
the number they put in for the diesel generator? Because I don't know a whole lot about the sort of the maintenance costs of a battery. I understand it's it's not significant. You check it once a year or something, spend maybe half an hour and replenish a catalyst or something like that. I don't really know. But with the diesel, don't you have to, I mean, to maintain that, I think you have to run it for an hour once a month or something like that. And so there's a significant ongoing O&M cost for a diesel generator. Do you know if they put something like that in there?
So they have an initial cost, and then they have life cycle additional maintenance type costs. It looks like the life cycle cost they have at 7. No, that's the total. I don't know. They've assigned some value to it, but I don't necessarily see it here.
The other thing is it'd be interesting to actually show this in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, because diesel generators also, I mean, that's going to increase your emissions. I don't actually know the numbers, but I have the impression that it's quite a lot.
Yeah.
For, like, people are always talking about lawnmowers are a huge emission factor.
If this were the real comparison we should be making, and it's not, because one's the fixed price for electricity and one's the real-time pricing, but if this was the real comparison and it was $5,000 difference over 25 years, I think that's that's pretty clear that you would want to choose the battery backup, but essentially solar-powered battery backup versus diesel generator backup for not a lot more money. But we don't have the proper comparison. They haven't done this real-time pricing with solar and diesel backup. So
One thought is that the amount of time that a generator would be running is pretty small, and so I guess not necessarily advocating for a diesel generator, but if we're looking at a situation where because of cost, maybe we're looking at solar plus diesel backup, or no solar and a diesel backup. I think I might want to take the diesel generator, and so there's a little bit of emissions there. But I think overall, it'd be fairly small, and would be happy to take the solar panel without the battery backup if that's what it took.
yeah, presumably they're modeling the diesel generator running 3 days for that outage once a year or something like that. It's not a lot of gas probably. The other thing, Todd, which you talked about earlier, is we're looking at the cost-effective PV plus storage, real-time pricing, negative $21,000 a year. That's without giving any value to backup. I mean, what if backup is worth $1,000 a year? All of a sudden, this is not a negative net present value; it's positive $4,000. So this is, to me, this is very close, but we need a little bit more analysis. We need to compare this scenario right here with real-time pricing, PV, and diesel.
So just one other key comment on these. You've got the percent renewable is 100%. And you're selling your claim to the renewable energy for the first 5 out of the 25 years. So all of these should say 80%.
Yeah, that's probably right.
It's so hard for people to understand the REX world that I think we should at least note it somehow if you share this, if you edit the file at some point.
Actually, now that I think about it, if you have battery backup, you're still selling the REX. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You're right. So this is their conclusions. They say not feasible, or not cost effective, but that's, again, because most of the scenarios that are negative, some of them are negative because we didn't give any value to backup or to resiliency. So that's a nice piece of work we got for free from the National Renewable Energy Lab.
But don't forget to emphasize the first one, which does say cost effective.
Correct. Solar alone on a fixed price is cost effective.
Thanks, Scott. Any other questions or comments on this one?
I might have missed it, but I wonder what the load in a fire station during a 3-day outing is, if the 3-day applies to the whole community. what kind of conditions might
Mm.
exist at the fire station in those conditions.
Yeah, they might make a lot more ice if it were summer.
Yeah.
And that's more
And-
demand.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't think, you don't mean more ice. I don't understand
Well,
the
it
ice comment. But
Fire
you mean
stations-
There
like,
could be all kinds
if there's
of
an emergency, they're gonna be going
response- yeah,
nonstop, right? So
emergency response
it's
and
one of their
relief
peak.
efforts.
Yeah. Well, the fire stations have ice makers, and that's something they distribute during emergency services during the summer.
Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah. It was the first thing that came to my head that, would go up.
I think I just still have sticker shock that a battery bank for that size system today is still essentially the same cost as installing like the PV panels and that. So the battery system effectively doubles the cost of your solar system.
Mhm.
And I think that that's really eye-opening and interesting that it's still that expensive for a battery bank.
Yeah, this was I think it was a 25 kW battery. Your house, if you wanted battery backup, you might be looking at 5 or 6 or 7. And I think also for the home, it is. Last time I looked, it effectively doubled your price.
And so just a follow-up question is that are you taking into account any retrofit work or energy improvements on the fire station itself in order to maybe take more advantage of being able to have a larger PV system on the roof but a smaller energy burden from the building to sell more energy back to the utility and to not only make up more, 65% of your load on a 3-day outage, but
Yeah.
increase that.
We're going to do that analysis with the Guaranteed Energy Savings Contract. Or a vendor will. The facility has a brand new roof, so, it's going to be a white roof, reflective. I don't know of any particular energy efficiency opportunities, but we'll find out if we are able to move forward with an investment-grade energy audit.
Any other questions? Not seeing any? Okay. Thank you, Scott. Do we have any announcements?
Yes, I have an announcement. The Institute for Sustainability, Energy, and Environment is now taking applications for a sustainability programs coordinator. You'll have to go to the University of Illinois website to search for that position. And I think it's more than a couple days still open, but you need to go look at it right now if you want to apply.
Okay. Seeing no other announcements, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
All opposed? We're adjourned.